The day after our Cold War, Emily Carter strutted around town with my so-called best friend, Ryan Kim, like they were the couple of the year. They were inseparable, arm in arm, laughing like nothing ever happened. A group of mutual acquaintances joked, "Emily, you're dating James Walker's brother now. If he cries, you're really done for." But Emily just sneered and laughed. "I used to give him face. Now, I don't care where he goes. I can't stand his tertiary disgusting." I was standing right outside the door and heard every damn word. It was like someone poured cold water straight down my spine. I didn't flinch. I just smirked to myself, tossed the gift I brought, something I spent hours picking out, to make peace, right into the nearest trash can, turned around, and left without looking back. When I got home, I walked into the fully decorated wedding suite I had designed and built myself. On the door, I had personally cut and pasted the bright red, "Double Happiness" character, which now felt like a cruel joke. I stared at it, coldly amused, and called a demolition team. "Hey, are you guys free now? I'll pay extra, just tear the whole place down." Within the hour, dozens of workers showed up. I sat on the couch calmly, giving instructions: destroy every wall, smash every cabinet, tear out the floors, and don't leave a single corner untouched. The workers hesitated at first, surprised, but I just waved my hand. All of it. I didn't just want to demolish the house, I wanted to erase every trace of her, every gift I gave her, every gift she gave me, every stupid little trinket that reminded me of 4 years of wasted effort. That included the grand piano she loved, the one that symbolized our relationship. I smashed it personally with a hammer, piece by piece, until the keys were scattered across the floor like shattered teeth. That villa was my masterpiece, something I designed from scratch with love, dreams, and sweat. And now, just dust and debris. I could put up with Emily's mood swings, her drama, even her sense of entitlement, but I would never put up with betrayal. Cheating was where I drew the line. Emily Carter was officially trash in my eyes, and I don't keep garbage in my life. When the last wall came crashing down, I stood there staring at the ruins. I tipped the workers generously, nodded, and drove away. No calls, no texts, no explanations. I went dark. I posted a single story on Instagram that evening: weddings cancelled. Emily Carter cheated on me with Ryan Kim. Congrats to the new couple. I logged out and drove to my apartment in Austin. When I turned my phone back on hours later, it blew up. Friends, family, even Emily's co-workers were messaging me in shock. The most ironic part? Ryan had the nerve to like my post and comment, "James, you misunderstood. Nothing happened between us." Yeah. Save it for someone who cares. Then came the call I'd been dreading: me mom. She rarely called, but when she did, it always meant a storm. "James Walker. You cancel a wedding over one little mistake? Are you insane? Marriage isn't a game." I cut her off. "If you like cheaters so much, go adopt her." My mom gasped, furious. "How dare you talk to me like that? Didn't you chase after Emily like a lunatic? Weren't you the one who insisted she was the one?" I paused. She wasn't wrong. I did chase Emily, hard. I even sabotaged the blind date my mom had arranged just to be with her. Back then, Emily's family had money and influence, and that was enough for my mom to stop protesting. But now she turned cold. She just made one mistake. "You men are so fragile. Can't even forgive your fiancé." The irony burned. My mom had said the same thing to my dad back when she cheated. And guess what? My dad didn't even hesitate. He divorced her and walked out of my life. Maybe I wasn't as decisive as him, but I wasn't going to be a pushover either. "If you love Emily Carter so much," I told her, "you go live with her." I hung up. It had been only 6 hours since my post, and I was sure Emily had already warmed another man's bed. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. That's when my phone rang. Aga, and it was my dad. We hadn't spoken in months. I sat up immediately and composed myself. "Hey, Dad. His voice was calm and warm. Don't be sad, son. You just ran into trash. My eyes welled up with tears. Was I really that bad to her? Some people, he said, don't deserve good things. They don't even recognize them. He had met Emily once briefly. I had invited him to her parents' house. But Emily ignored him the entire visit, acting like he didn't exist. I hadn't noticed it then. After dinner, my dad left without a word. When I asked why, he just said, James, you need to open your eyes when you choose a woman. Emily had pulled me aside that night, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, I just don't like you paying attention to anyone else. I thought it was cute. Possessive, maybe. I didn't get it. But now, it all made sense. After that call with my dad, I wasn't even sad anymore. She wasn't the one who got away, she was the one I threw out. The next morning, I woke up early, downed a glass of water, and started cleaning my apartment. I hadn't lived there since I moved in with Emily. Midway through hanging laundry, my phone rang. I picked it up. Emily's name lit up the screen. I let it ring, then hung up. She called again. Get lost. Don't make me puke. Her voice came through, sounding wounded. James, how dare you talk to me like that? I nearly threw up hearing your voice. I said nothing. Then I heard Ryan's voice in the background. Hey man, don't be mad. That day was just an act. She came to me to get your attention. I closed my eyes and clenched my fists. Ryan Kim, we're not friends anymore. Click. I hung up. My chest burned. I found a random movie to distract myself and fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was dark and Emily was standing in my living room. She had cooked instant noodles, the only thing she could make, and was smiling like nothing happened. James, you're awake. I made dinner. I stared at her with disgust. Who told you to come here? Her smile faded. Why are you still mad at me? It was all a misunderstanding, I interrupted, we're over. I smashed the wedding house. Cancelled the wedding. You understand that, right? She looked panicked. What did you say? I stood up, looked her dead in the eyes. I don't love you anymore. Her face drained of color. That's impossible. You're just mad. You still love me. I laughed. Emily, where do you get this confidence? You think you're so special? You're not. She was speechless. I physically dragged her out, changed the password to my door lock, and hired a cleaner to scrub the apartment again. When she dirted the floors, I sent the cleaning bill to her dad with a message, your daughter made this mess. Please pay. He replied right away, James, stay away from Emily. Let's part peacefully. No problem. Just pay the bill. I stared at the crisp $200 in my hand, the exact payment Mr. Carter sent after I invoiced him for the cleaning service his daughter forced me to book, and took that money straight to a nearby cafe to grab a decent coffee because sleep had evaded me the night before and I wasn't planning to close my eyes again anytime soon, not with the way my thoughts were spiraling, not with the way the image of Emily Carter clinging to Ryan Kim still burned in my mind like a brand, and while I waited for my coffee, I sent him a voice message because apparently texting wasn't enough for these people. Don't try to test me again, I am done with your family of lunatics, I said calmly but firmly, letting every ounce of tolerance I'd built for them over the past 4 years melt into sarcasm. And sure, I used to think Emily was just misunderstood because her home life sucked, her dad emotionally absent, her mom cold and distant, the housekeepers taking turns treating her like garbage, and back then, I felt bad for her, like I needed to protect her from a world that never offered her love, and maybe that's why I let her get away with her tantrums, her mind games, her petty manipulations just so she could get attention. And yeah, it was me who helped mend the bridge between her and her father, me who thought maybe if she had one person in her life show up for her, she'd stop being so emotionally chaotic, and I was that guy. I planned those dinners, I bought the gifts, I scripted the apologies, and now they were both acting like I was disposable, teaming up to gaslight me, to pin the blame on me as if I was the one who wasn't enough. like I wasn't the one dragging that whole relationship forward with bleeding fingers while she took the credit and played the victim. And then that night, I got a message from Ryan Kim, a photo at first glance just another attention-grabbing pic until I saw what it really was, Emily, in the same outfit she wore that day, lying on his chest with that dazed, "Come hither" look like she was about to roll right into his bed. And no, her face wasn't visible, but I knew her body, I knew that pose, I knew that damned necklace she refused to take off, and I was livid, not because she was doing it, but because she was still trying to convince me that nothing happened, like I was born yesterday, so I posted it straight to my Instagram story with one caption, "Which piece of trash just sent me evidence of their own cheating?" And of course, Ryan had to call me immediately, probably panicking now that his dirty laundry was out in the open, and I answered with zero emotion, just waiting to hear what kind of excuse he'd try next, and his voice came in like an overconfident game show host, "James, she loves me now, not you, just let her go, man. She said she finally knows what a real man is," and I smiled like I'd just watched the end of a comedy special, replying, "Congratulations, bro, you're officially sleeping with the garbage I threw out." And when he got defensive, said I was always so proud and aloof and now I was the loser, I replied coolly, "You're the one clinging to a woman who had to cheat to feel powerful. You sure you're the one who won here?" And he hung up, obviously rattled, which made my night slightly more tolerable, but since I was out of food at home, I figured I'd head to the market to grab a few things and reset my routine, only to bump into Emily in the middle of the produce section, and she had the nerve to march straight up to me like nothing happened, like we were still dating, and said in that soft, manipulative voice of hers, "James, what you saw online, it's not what you think," and I stared at her, feeling nothing but mild irritation and a deep desire to disappear into the frozen foods aisle. "I thought we were over, Emily," I said calmly, and her face fell, fake tears forming in her eyes like clockwork. "I just wanted you to care more about me. I don't even love him, I swear," she whispered, and I honestly wanted to laugh out loud right there in front of the lemons. Because this woman really thought she could tug my heartstrings with the same tired routine she'd always used. Turns out, when the heart finally breaks, it doesn't crack, it shatters and hardens. And I told her, "You're just another weed on the sidewalk now." Emily stepped on, ignored, and irrelevant, and the look on her face, the complete breakdown of her usual confident self, was almost satisfying, but also pitiful, because I realized she never actually loved Mesh, just loved how much I used to love her, and now that it was gone, she didn't know who she was anymore. And that night, when I was finally back home cooking a basic dinner, my old classmate Nathan Reed messaged me, asking if I wanted to come to a reunion over the weekend, and I figured, why not? New start, new people, no drama, but clearly, I'd forgotten that karma has a sense of humor, because guess who else showed up to that dinner? Emily Carter and Ryan freaking Kim, walking in like they owned the place, and the second I saw them, I stood up to leave, not even trying to hide my disgust, but Emily chased after me, grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Please, James, I don't love him, I came just to explain everything. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try," and the whole room went dead silent, eyes flickering between us like it was a live soap opera. And then Ryan stood up, his face red. "Emily, what the hell are you saying? Didn't you tell me you liked me?" And her tone flipped like a switchblade. "Shut up, Ryan, don't twist things between me and my fiancé." And that's when I actually laughed, because wow, this woman really had the nerve to still call me her fiancé in public, and I yanked my hand free and said, "Emily, stop acting like we're still something. I don't love you, I don't even like you," and she looked heartbroken, like I'd slapped her in the face. And Ryan looked crushed, like his whole manhood had just been ripped out in front of a crowd, and he shouted, "You played me, Emily. You said James was nothing to you," and she screamed back, "You'll never be on his level, not in this life," and I just rolled my eyes and sat back down next to Nathan, who was clearly regretting inviting everyone, while Ryan fumed and said, "James, stop acting so high and mighty, you think you're better than all of us," and I calmly picked up my water glass and splashed it straight onto his smug face, and he jumped back like I'd poured acid, yelling, "What the hell, man?" and I leaned back. Deadpan, that's what I do to people who pretend to be my brother and screw my fiancé, and no one came to his defense, not even Emily, who just stood there frozen, and Nathan awkwardly tried to change the subject, but the vibe was wrecked, so I stood up again, grabbed my jacket, and told him, "Next time, don't invite me if those two are coming," and I walked out without looking back, only to be followed once again by, you guessed it, Emily Carter, who ran out barefoot, saying, "James, I'll drive you," And just as I was about to tell her to go to hell, my ride pulled up, and it was none other than Olivia Yu, my current boss and, ironically, Emily's older sister, who gave Emily a long side eye and said, "This your ex?" And I nodded without explaining, and Emily's eyes turned red instantly, "So that's it? You dumped me for her," and I said, exasperated, "We're not together anymore, Emily. I can date whoever I want now," and she snapped, "You used to block every girl on your phone because of me," and I laughed, "You even deleted my mother from my contacts, remember? You're not exactly the voice of reason," and Olivia, amused, nudged me to get in the car, and we drove off while Emily stood on the curb like a scene from a breakup music video, and when Olivia asked, "She always this dramatic?" I just muttered, "You don't even know the half of it," and through the rearview mirror, I saw Emily crying again, probably regretting everything, but none of it mattered. I was done. For good. After that chaotic reunion night, I didn't hear from Emily for a couple days, and honestly, I thought she'd finally learned to back off, but that illusion shattered when I woke up the next morning to dozens of missed calls and texts from random numbers, all clearly her tone, as if I wouldn't recognize the way she fake cried through her fingers via text, some messages begging, some accusing me of moving on too fast, and a few just plain incoherent like she typed with trembling fingers at 2 a.m., but I didn't reply. I didn't even read them fully. I just blocked every number, turned off my phone, and got back to focusing on work, because for the first time in a while, I actually had peace until the next morning, when I went downstairs to grab some breakfast, and someone suddenly hugged me tightly from behind, her whole body ice cold and drenched, and my spine stiffened instantly because I knew that perfume, that grip, that desperation. It was Emily Carter, soaking wet from head to toe like she'd stood outside my apartment all night in the rain, her voice trembling as she sobbed, "James, don't leave me, please, let's just call it even this time, I'll never do it again," and I pushed her off instinctively, only to realize her face was red, her lips chapped, and her whole body was burning up, her skin so hot it startled me. And suddenly I wasn't angry. I was just trying to figure out whether I should call 911 or let her collapse on the sidewalk, because as much as I hated what she did to me, I didn't want a dead ex on my conscience, and before I could even process, she swayed on her feet and fainted straight into my arms, mumbling my name like we were still something, like nothing had happened, and right at that moment, Olivia Yu pulled up, saw the scene, and sprinted over like a soldier in a war zone, grabbing Emily from me and shouting, "What the hell happened to her?" And I just muttered, "She's got a fever," probably stood outside all night to prove a point, and Olivia didn't hesitate. She threw open the car door, helped me drag Emily inside, and drove us to the nearest hospital like a pro, and during the ride, Emily kept murmuring things like, "James, I'm sorry, don't go," in that half-conscious, pitiful voice, while Olivia rolled her eyes and said, "Women like this are always 3 drinks into their own drama. I swear she's auditioning for an Oscar right now." And I chuckled despite myself, muttering, "You ever thought about doing stand-up?" And Olivia replied, "Nah, finance pays better," and when we got to the ER, the doctor said if we'd waited even an hour longer, her brain might have cooked from the fever, and that was a weird thought to digest, because part of me was still furious at her, but the other part of meth part with a conscience was just relieved she didn't die on my doorstep, so I sat down in the waiting room and sent a quick text to Mr. Carter, explaining the situation, expecting some form of concern, but the man had the audacity to accuse me of trying to scam him for hospital bills, saying, "Don't use this excuse to get more money out of me," and I actually laughed out loud in the waiting room because wow, I didn't think it was possible for a father to care less about his daughter than I did, and Olivia, who had bought me dumplings from the cafeteria, handed them to me while commenting, "He's a real piece of work, huh," and I just nodded, too tired to even be bitter anymore, just hungry and needing carbs, and while I was eating, she eyed my clothes and said, "You wore pajamas to the street again? Seriously?" And I shrugged, "Emergency, what do you expect?" And she shook her head like I was the most hopeless man alive, but then asked, "Why are you still entertaining this girl's mess?" And I didn't know how to answer that, because honestly, I wasn't entertaining anything. I just didn't want a corpse outside my apartment, but before I could respond, the doctor came out and told us Emily had stabilized. So I quickly downed the last of the dumplings and walked to her room, not noticing Olivia's subtle look before I left, and when I stepped in, Emily yanked the 4 out of her hand like she was starring in her own tragic drama, and I just looked at her and sighed, "Don't do anything pointless," and she immediately started crying again, her voice cracking as she begged, "Please, James, don't leave me, please forgive me, I'll do anything, I was wrong, so wrong," and I stood there, arms crossed, absolutely done with her antics. Emily, this ended a long time ago. I don't want this anymore. You cheated. That's a line you can't uncross, and she collapsed onto the floor sobbing, clutching my leg, saying, then at least don't be with Olivia, please, not her, and I blinked, genuinely confused, who said anything about Olivia, and it hit Mesh was projecting, jealous, making assumptions, maybe because Olivia was the first woman in my life she couldn't control or intimidate, and I looked down at her and said firmly, you don't get to decide who I date now. You lost that right, and I turned to walk out as she cried louder behind me, and for a second I felt like the villain, but then I remembered everything she did, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, and the guilt dissolved like sugar in rain, and I left my Venmo QR code on her hospital table with a sticky note, please repay your own medical bill, and I walked out to find Olivia waiting by the car, and she offered to buy real food since I technically hadn't eaten a proper meal in 24 hours. And I shrugged, my stomach's used to chaos at this point, and she laughed but didn't push it, and once we were driving back, she looked at me and said, you've cleaned up her mess, what now? And I said honestly, no clue. Just work, I guess, and Olivia hesitated for a beat before saying, James the First, and I interrupted with a tired smile, you said the company's too busy to mix personal stuff, remember, and the disappointment on her face was immediate, but she forced a smile and said, still good at dodging, huh, and I replied, I'm not jumping from one failed thing to another, I need space to breathe, and she nodded like she understood, even though we both knew it hurt a little, and in the following weeks, I threw myself into work completely, took on more responsibilities, stayed late voluntarily, and finally, I got the Cali was being promoted and transferred to the New York office, the same opportunity one gave up a year ago when I was still under Emily's thumb, and this time, I didn't hesitate for a second, I accepted it, packed my bags, and headed out, and on the night before I flew, our department had a farewell dinner, and that's when fate decided to throw me one last gift. I ran into Ryan Kim, getting his face slapped by a man twice his size outside the restaurant, and I froze when I realized who it was, a mid-level investor in our field whose wife, apparently, had been seduced by none other than Ryan, and I stood there, watching as Ryan's face turned red, then purple, then swollen, while the man screamed, you think you can mess with my wife, punk? She's 49, and I nearly choked because I couldn't believe how low Ryan had sunk, and I didn't intervene, I just watched from across the street with a smile on my face, because seeing him get humiliated publicly was a better closure than I ever imagined, and when his eyes finally met mine, filled with hatred and defeat, I simply nodded, got into my Uber, and let him drown in his own disgrace, because I knew the most painful punishment wasn't a punch, it was watching someone else walk away from the wreckage you created, completely untouched and utterly unbothered. Sure enough, the moment Ryan Kim's affair with a married woman hit public forums, his name got dragged across every social platform like a trending train wreck, and people who once defended him now turned their backs, saying things like, James Walker was too nice, he should have cut him off years ago, and I wasn't even mad at that, I agreed, yeah, I had been too nice, I used to help Ryan with job referrals, pay for his ramen when he was broke, even covered for him when he skipped shifts at our internship, and now, the same guy had tried to replace me in every way and ended up with a 50-year-old married woman slapping him in front of an entire finance board dinner, poetic justice if I've ever seen it, and meanwhile, I was getting ready for my move to New York, minding my own business, scrolling Instagram when I suddenly saw a picture that stopped me cold, a photo of a villa, rebuilt exactly like the wedding house I had personally designed, down to the window shapes and the custom tiles I had special ordered, and it didn't take me long to realize who posted it, because right after that, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number, and I didn't answer at first, but curiosity got the best of me, and the moment I picked up, I heard her voice, hoarse and thin like she hadn't slept in days, James, I'm sorry, I rebuilt everything, it looks exactly the same, even the piano, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine, not because of the words, but because of the desperation behind them, and I replied dryly, good for you, but what does that have to do with me? And before she could say anything else, I cut her off, don't call again, and hung up, but of course, she called again immediately, crying, please don't hang up, I bought the same furniture, I found the exact chandelier, the same piano, everything's back the way it was, please just come see it, and I suddenly felt nauseated, like the idea of her trying to Frankenstein our past back together was more disturbing than moving on, because no matter how identical it looked, it wasn't real Anna Marie, it was a replica of a lie, and I snapped, what's the point of recreating something that died? I'm not coming back. Stop being so delusional. It's pathetic, and she went silent for a beat, just breathing into the receiver, so I hung up again and tossed my phone onto the couch, grabbed my luggage, and headed to the airport without looking back, and just as I was boarding the flight, another call came in, his time from Mr. Carter, and I already knew it wasn't going to be pleasant, so I answered it on speaker while walking through the terminal, and his voice came through sharp and accusatory. Emily tried to kill herself. Are you satisfied now? And I blinked, emotionless, glancing at the gate number as I replied, she's at the hospital, isn't she? So why are you calling me? And he exploded, calling me heartless, cold-blooded, said I was a monster for abandoning her when she was at her lowest, and I stood there by the boarding gate, completely calm, and said, the real monsters are the ones who let their daughter grow up abused in their own house, who let maids treat her like trash while they played family in front of guests. Don't act righteous now, and I didn't stop there. I laid into him hard, through every repressed insult I'd held back for years, called him a coward, a fraud, a man who couldn't love his own daughter and had the nerve to blame her boyfriends for her mess, and he sputtered on the line like I'd stabbed him in the lungs. But I wasn't done. You think you're upset because she overdosed? I was the one who had to scrape her off the floor, send her to the ER while you were too busy playing victim, and I ended the call with a simple, don't contact me again, and walked onto that plane like I was shedding my last dead layer of skin, because from that moment on, I wasn't going to carry any of their guilt, not his, not hers, not anyone's, and when I landed in New York hours later, the company car was already waiting to take me to a modern apartment in Midtown, just enough space for one person, with a view of the skyline and a silence that didn't suffocate me for once, and while I was unpacking, Olivia texted me, she's stable. They pumped her stomach, and I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji and nothing more, because even though a part of me once cared, that part had been buried under the rubble of my own self-respect, and I walked to the window, watching as the sky darkened and a street musician below started playing an upbeat tune on his guitar, completely off-key but smiling like he was performing at Madison Square Garden. And something about that made me laugh, so I tossed a few bills out the window, hit the sidewalk perfectly, and the guy looked up, waved, and shouted, thanks, man. I'm gonna be famous one day, and I shouted back, I believe it, and we both laughed like we'd known each other for years, and then he told me his story. He used to have a home, a wife, a kid, until life kicked him in the teeth, and now he preferred the streets, said he didn't want a roof over his head if it meant giving up his freedom, and as strange as it sounded, I understood it, that need to escape, to breathe without someone controlling your every move, and when I asked him if he was hungry, he shook his head and said, I've got this guitar, man. That's enough, and before I walked back in, he handed me a wrinkled photo of himself signed on the back, for the guy who tipped me when no one else did. Keep going, and I still keep that photo tucked in my passport, because somehow, a stranger in rags knew exactly what I needed to hear more than the people I once bled for, and later that night, I got one final voicemail from Emily, voice wrecked and barely audible, I don't want you to move on, James. I'll fix everything, I promise. Just tell me what you want. I'll be anything for you, and I didn't even flinch as I deleted the message without listening to the rest, because there's nothing she could say anymore that would unbreak what she shattered, and when I walked back to the window and looked down, the street musician was gone, replaced by silence, but it didn't feel lonely, it felt earned, like I had finally emptied the poison out of my system, and I poured myself a drink, raised the glass to no one, and whispered, to freedom. After settling into my new life in New York, everything finally began to click into place. My days were packed with work I actually enjoyed, the team respected me, and I was finally living the kind of life I used to put on hold for someone who never deserved the pause, and even though my apartment was small, it felt like mine, quiet and free, no drama, no screaming, no emotional blackmail disguised as love, just peace and deadlines, which was honestly the best upgrade I'd ever given myself, but of course, peace doesn't last long when you've still got emotional landmines back home, because just when I started thinking maybe Emily Carter had given up for good, she managed to find a new way to crawl back into my life, and this time, it wasn't just messages or calls or dramatic hospital trips. This time it was her physically showing up outside my building, disheveled and sobbing again, like some walking billboard for regret. Except this time, she wasn't alone, because right there beside her was her father, Mr. Carter, looking as bitter as ever, as if showing up unannounced in front of my office building in the middle of the afternoon was some kind of peace offering, and I stepped outside in the middle of a client call, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, and the moment I saw them, I sighed so loud the guy on the other end of the line asked if I was okay, and I just said, yeah, just ran into my past in 4K, and hung up, then walked over, keeping my voice low, why are you here, and Emily immediately lunged forward, trying to grab my hand, James, please, just hear me out, I know I messed up, but I've changed, I swear, I can't sleep, I can't eat, and I pulled my hand away before she could latch on again, Emily, this is stalking, not a love story, do you understand that, and Mr. Carter stepped in like he was still relevant, you're being cruel, she almost died because of you, and I shot him a look that could split stone, she almost died because of you, because you raised her to think love means ownership, that crying harder wins arguments, that cheating can be forgiven if it's pretty enough, and he opened his mouth like he had a comeback but couldn't find anything solid to say, so I turned to Emily and said, I'm not going to say it again, stay away from me, I've moved on, and she asked the same question she always asked, like a broken record, is it Olivia? Are you two together? And I didn't even flinch, it doesn't matter if it's Olivia or anyone else. It's none of your business anymore, and I walked back inside without looking back, because the chapter had ended long ago. She was just the footnote trying to rewrite the book, and a few days later, I got an invitation to speak at a tech conference, and as I stepped onto the stage and looked out at the sea of unfamiliar faces, I realized something. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't haunted, I wasn't distracted by who might be watching or what people back home might think, I was just there, present, in the moment, fully me, and after my talk, I checked my phone and saw a flood of comments and messages on my old Instagram post, the one where I announced the breakup, and among the sea of emojis and king behavior memes, I saw a direct message request from Ryan Kim himself, no joke, like the man still hadn't learned anything, and when I opened it, all it said was, you really think you won? You're still just a placeholder for people like us, and I actually laughed because the desperation was so loud I could practically hear it through the screen, and I didn't reply, I just screenshotted it, posted it to my story with the caption, some people lose and still don't get the lesson, and logged out, and later that night, Olivia came by my apartment with barbecue takeout and a massive watermelon, the same kind we split once during a random work night when deadlines had us both sleep deprived and weirdly giddy, and she walked in like she belonged there, kicked off her heels, opened a soda, and flopped on the couch, and for a moment, I wondered what life would have been like if I'd met her before Emily, if I hadn't wasted years on someone who only knew how to take, not give, and Olivia caught my stare and said, what, you thinking something deep again, and I shook my head, smirking, just wondering how you make watermelon taste better than it should, and she laughed, it's the boss privilege, and we sat there, eating quietly while the city buzzed outside, until she leaned her head on the back of the couch and said, you know, I used to think you were cold when I first hired you, and I raised an eyebrow, and now, and she smiled faintly, now I know you were just surviving, and her words landed somewhere deep, like an anchor finally touching the ocean floor, and I didn't respond, didn't need to, because she already knew, and after she left, I cleaned up the dishes and stood by the window watching the rain start to fall, the glass fogging from the inside, and I felt no urge to cry, no urge to chase, no urge to check my phone for her name, because for once, I was truly empty of her, and it was the best feeling in the world, but of course, closure has a funny way of showing up one last time, because the very next morning, while I was brushing my teeth, I got a call from an old number I hadn't seen in over a year. Mrs. Carter, Emily's mother, someone I barely spoke to even when we were engaged, and I debated not answering, but something told me it wasn't about Emily this time, and I was right. She simply said, she's gone, and for a second, I couldn't process the weight of those two words. What do you mean gone? I asked, and she said softly, she left a note, disappeared 3 days ago, we thought she'd turn up but she hasn't, and I felt my stomach twist, not because I still loved her, not because I wanted her back, but because I knew how fragile she was beneath all that arrogance and fire, and for a brief moment, guilt returned like an old scar aching in the rain, but then I remembered everything, every betrayal, every manipulation, every fake apology, and I swallowed hard and said, I hope she finds peace, wherever she is, and hung up before I could feel more than that, and I stared at myself in the mirror, foam still around my lips, wondering if this was what closure really looked like, quiet, complicated, and a little bit bitter, and when I walked out of the bathroom, the sun was shining brighter than it had in days, as if the world was subtly saying, it's okay now. Keep going. I didn't expect to hear from Emily Carter again, not after the call from her mother saying she'd disappeared, not after everything had already collapsed, burned, and been buried, but life, being the twisted playwright it is, had one last curtain call planned, because 3 weeks later, as I was walking out of my office on a random Thursday, Olivia met me downstairs with an odd look on her face, holding her phone in one hand, shaking her head slowly as she said, "You might want to see this," and she handed me the screen where a short video was trending. Grainy surveillance footage of a girl in a white dress, standing on the edge of a pier late at night, arms wrapped around herself, and even without seeing her face, I knew it was Emily. Her posture, her height, the way she stood too still, like she was hoping the wind would knock her over so she wouldn't have to make the decision herself, and just like that, the comments exploded. Is this the ex-fiancée of James Walker? Isn't this the girl who cheated and faked a suicide attempt? What's she doing alone at the harbor at 2 a.m., and it was insane how fast people could forget someone was human, even if they'd done awful things, and Olivia looked at me, eyes uncertain, "You okay?" And I nodded slowly, because strangely, I felt nothing at all, like my heart had already closed the door and was politely reminding the world not to knock anymore, and even when news came in that she was found again, curled up under a tarp behind a dockworker's shed, barely conscious but breathing, I didn't flinch, didn't feel drawn to check on her, didn't send flowers or calls or texts. I just continued with my week, focused on a new product launch, helped a junior analyst build their confidence, and spent my evenings walking the New York streets without headphones, listening to the city breathe. And one night while eating dinner, I got a message request on Instagram from someone I hadn't expected. Emily herself. The profile now private, no photos, just a single message: "This time, I'm really letting go. Thank you for loving me, and I'm sorry for not knowing how to love you back." And I sat there staring at the screen, waiting for an emotional response to rise, something sharp or heavy, but there was nothing, just quiet understanding, the kind that comes when you finally realize the chapter wasn't just over, it had already turned to dust. So I didn't reply, didn't screenshot it, didn't even tell Olivia about it, because it wasn't about revenge or validation anymore, it was about peace, and I had it now, for real this time. And a few days later, I found myself back in Central Park, same bench, same busker playing guitar like it was his last day on earth, and he saw me again, waved like we were old friends, back in town, suit man, and I nodded, laughing, "Yeah, still hustling," and he strummed a chord and said, "Then here's one for the road," and he started playing the same off-key love song he'd played that first night, the one I tipped him for, and this time, I listened with no bitterness, no memories stabbing at my ribs, just a quiet kind of joy, because I'd survived her, survived me, survived the version of myself who thought pain was proof of love. And somewhere between the second and third chorus, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Got an idea. You, me, rooftop barbecue, no drama, just grilled steak and bad wine. You in?" And I laughed out loud, thumbs already flying, "Only if you let me burn the hot dogs this time." And she replied, "Deal, but no ketchup on steak, you monster." And I pocketed my phone and leaned back on the bench, watching the clouds roll lazily across the summer sky, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, wasn't wondering what she was doing or if I should have tried harder, because I knew now that love without trust is just performance, and forgiveness without change is manipulation, and I had given more chances than I should have, bent so far backward I forgot what standing straight felt like, but now, I remembered, and I was never bending for anyone again. And a month later, I got promoted again, became director of product, got flown out to a panel in San Francisco, spoke on resilience and leadership, and while I was answering questions, a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "How do you bounce back from betrayal?" And I paused, smiled, and said, "You stop seeing it as betrayal and start seeing it as freedom." And the room went quiet for a second before people started nodding, writing it down, and I realized then I had turned my pain into purpose without even noticing. And later, on the flight back, Olivia leaned over from her seat next to mine and said, "You handled that question like a therapist," and I laughed. "I've had enough material to write a book," and she grinned, title it, "How Not to Date a Liar," and I shook my head, "Nah, too passive-aggressive. I'd call it, Thanks for the Red Flags," and she clinked her ginger ale against mine, "Bestseller, for sure." And when we landed, the air felt cleaner, like even the wind had moved on, and I knew then that I wasn't running anymore, not from Emily, not from my own choices, not from anything. I was finally living. And as I unlocked my apartment and stepped into the familiar scent of cedar wood and freshly cleaned floors, I turned on the lamp, sank into the couch, and watched the city lights blink Like a heartbeat outside my window, and somewhere in that moment, I realized the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't leaving her, it was choosing to stay gone, choosing to heal without needing to be seen, choosing to rise without the applause. And when Olivia texted, "What's for lunch tomorrow?" I replied without hesitation, "Whatever you want, boss," and hit send with a smirk, because life isn't about fixing what broke you, it's about building something better where the pain used to live, and that's exactly what I was doing.